One whistle. That's all it took. Not a gunshot. Not a computer code. Just a single, piercing note at exactly 2,600 hertz. In the 1950s, that sound was more than just a noise. It was a skeleton key to the most powerful network on the planet. With that one sound, a blind 5-year-old boy named Joseph Carl Ingressia Jr. did the unthinkable. He bypassed the security of a multi-billion-dollar monopoly. He didn't just make a free call, he proved that the giants of industry were vulnerable to a child with a gifted ear. The world would come to know him as Joybubbles. And while his name sounded like a toy, his legacy was a revolution. Because his secret underground movement didn't just stay in the shadows. It found its way into a California garage, right into the hands of two young dreamers named Jobs and Wozniak. This is the forgotten origin story of the personal computer. A story of how an outcast showed the world that even the tallest giants eventually fall. This is the legend of Joybubbles. Joseph Carl Ingressia Jr. was born in 1949 into a world of total darkness. But where sight ended, a different kind of vision began. Joe didn't just hear noises, he heard the mathematical structure of the universe. He possessed absolute pitch, a rare neurological gift that allowed him to identify the exact frequency of any sound, from a bird's chirp to the hum of a refrigerator. While other children were obsessed with comic books and television, Joe was obsessed with the humming, clicking, and whistling of the machines that ran America. To Joe, the world wasn't made of light, it was made of vibrations. By the age of 5, Joe had found his favorite toy, the telephone. In the 1950s, the phone was a mystery to most people, a black plastic box that connected you to a ghost in a machine. But to Joe, the telephone was a living thing. He would sit for hours, dialing random numbers just to hear the clicks of the mechanical switches in the local central office. He began to map the phone system in his head, memorizing the specific songs the network sang when it connected a call to New York, or Chicago, or London. He was a 5-year-old cartographer of an invisible empire. Then came the day that changed history. Joe was whistling to himself while on a long-distance call, just playing with the tones as he always did. Suddenly he hit a note. A pure, piercing, high-pitched whistle. Instantly, the line went dead. But it wasn't a disconnect. Joe realized that the humming, busy signal had changed. He had accidentally triggered a hidden command in the AT&T computer. He had discovered the mother frequency, 2,600 hertz. In that moment, the blind boy from Florida realized he wasn't just a passenger on the phone line anymore. He was the pilot. He had found the secret password to the most expensive, most secure network on Earth, and he had done it with nothing but his own breath. Think about the gravity of this discovery. AT&T had spent billions of dollars building a secure infrastructure. They had the best engineers, the biggest labs, and the protection of the US government. And yet, their entire kingdom was vulnerable to a single sound. Joe Ingressia had found the God mode button for the 20th century. He was a child who could now listen to the president, reroute international calls, and collapse phone exchanges, all while his parents thought he was just playing in his room. The age of the hacker hadn't just begun. It had been born in a whistle. Joe Ingressia didn't just find a glitch, he discovered a continent. In the early 60s, the phone system wasn't just a utility, it was the largest, most complex machine ever built by human hands. It was a labyrinth of copper and light. And for a specific kind of person, the outsiders, the dreamers, the ones who didn't fit into the 9 to 5 world, this machine was irresistible. They called themselves phone freaks. They weren't looking to steal money. They were looking for the back door to reality. They realized that if you knew the right frequencies, the world had no borders. Imagine a time before the internet. No chat rooms. No forums. The freaks created their own. They found looper rounds, secret test lines that AT&T engineers used for maintenance. Suddenly, a blind kid in Florida, a blind teenager in New York, and a college dropout in California were all talking to each other for free in the middle of the night. They were the world's first virtual community. This was the era of the blue box. A small, hand-built circuit board that could replicate the multi-frequency tones of the phone network. It was a magic wand. You could sit in a dorm room in Berkeley and hop through a switch in London, a satellite over the Pacific, and a receiver in Tokyo, just to hear what the weather sounded like on the other side of the planet. The media and the law called them thieves. AT&T called them a threat to national security. But if you look closer, they were something else entirely. They were the proto-internet. Before there was Google, they were scanning the network to see where it went. Before there was Wikipedia, they were sharing technical manuals like they were sacred texts. They were testing the limits of what a person could do when they had total access to information. They weren't breaking the system, they were exploring it. They were the astronauts of the copper wire. This subculture was the training ground for the digital age. It taught a generation that technology wasn't a black box you just used, it was a playground you could rebuild. When we look at our smartphones today, we see the polish and the glass. But underneath it all, the DNA of the freaks is still there. The spirit of exploration, the thrill of the hack, and the belief that information wants to be free. Joe Ingressia didn't just birth a subculture, he gave us the blueprints for the modern world. In 1971, the phone freak fever reached a dorm room at UC Berkeley. Two college kids, one a brilliant, shy engineer named Stephen Wozniak, the other a charismatic, sharp-edged dreamer named Steve Jobs, read an article in Esquire magazine. It was the story of Joybubbles. For most people, it was a quirky tale about a blind boy and a whistle. But for the two Steves, it was a revelation. They realized that if a child could control the world's largest machine with a sound, then the machine itself was hackable. The mystery was gone. The magic of the phone company was just math. And Wozniak knew he could build a box to speak that language. Wozniak didn't just build a device, he built a masterpiece. He spent nights hunched over a breadboard, soldering together oscillators to mimic the exact frequencies of the AT&T network. He created the Blue Box. It was their first product, their first collaboration. Before the iMac, before the iPhone, before the trillion-dollar valuation, there was a small plastic case filled with wires that allowed you to call anyone, anywhere, for free. It was a digital master key. And it was Steve Jobs who saw the potential. Not just for the tech, but for the business. He realized they could sell these magic boxes to students for $150 apiece. The Apple business model was born in the shadows of a phone booth. But they weren't just businessmen, they were pranksters, fueled by the Joybubbles spirit. One night, Wozniak decided to test the limits. He used his blue box to hop through half a dozen international switches, eventually reaching the Vatican. He claimed to be Henry Kissinger. He demanded to speak to the Pope. They actually woke up a bishop before the ruse fell apart. In that moment, these two kids realized they held a power that kings and presidents didn't even understand. They were masters of the universe from a garage in Los Altos. The fear of the system was gone forever. Decades later, Steve Jobs was asked a simple question. If there had been no blue boxes, would there have been an Apple? His answer was immediate. I don't think there would have been an Apple. The blue box taught them that they could build something, a small piece of hardware, that could control a giant infrastructure. It gave them the confidence to take on IBM. It gave them the audacity to think they could change the world. Every time you look at the Apple logo, you are looking at the evolution of a blind boy's whistle. Without the frequency of Joybubbles, the Silicon Valley we know today simply wouldn't exist. To understand why Joe Ingressia was so dangerous, you have to understand AT&T in the 1960s. They weren't just a phone company, they were Ma Bell. A protected, government-sanctioned monopoly that owned every wire, every pole, and every handset in America. Their network was considered the most complex machine ever built. It was designed to be indestructible. The engineers at Bell Labs, the same place that invented the transistor and the laser, believed their in-band signaling system was a masterpiece of efficiency. They had built a fortress of copper, but they had left the front door unlocked, and they didn't even know it. Here was the fatal mistake. AT&T used the same channel for voice that they used for control. In their brilliant design, a tone of exactly 2600 hertz told the computerized switches that a line was idle and ready for a new command. The engineers assumed that no human, and no sounds from the outside world, would ever hit that specific, pure frequency during a call. They built a billion-dollar empire on the assumption that a sound could be kept secret. Then came Joe. When Joybubbles whistled that note into a receiver, the massive AT&T computers didn't hear a child. They heard an authorized operator. The fortress didn't just crumble, it opened its gates and bowed. When the phone Phreaking movement exploded, AT&T didn't just get annoyed, they panicked. A single outcast with a whistle, or a toy from a cereal box, was suddenly costing them millions in unbilled long-distance calls. But the money wasn't the real issue. The issue was control. If a blind kid in a bedroom could reroute calls through a military switchboard or eavesdrop on a corporate boardroom, the illusion of Ma Bell's total authority was dead. The company spent years, and millions of dollars, trying to hunt the freaks down. They worked with the FBI, they tapped lines, and they threw Joe Ingressia in jail. They treated a group of blind kids and hobbyists like they were international terrorists. In the end, the giants realized they couldn't win a war against a sound. Joybubbles had exposed a structural fragility that couldn't be patched with a simple fix. AT&T was eventually forced to spend billions of dollars to move their signaling out of band, separating the control tones from the voice lines. It was the largest infrastructure overhaul in history, and it only happened because one man proved that even the most powerful corporation on Earth can be undone by a single, perfect note. It's a lesson we're still learning today. In the digital age, it doesn't matter how much money you have. If there is a flaw in your code, a single person can topple your empire. As the 1970s faded and the Silicon Valley revolution he sparked began to mint billionaires, Joe Ingressia made a choice that baffled the world. He didn't take a high-paying job at Apple. He didn't become a cybersecurity consultant for the NSA. Instead, he did something far more radical. In a world obsessed with disruption and scaling, Joe decided he was done being an adult. He officially, legally, changed his name to Joybubbles. He declared himself to be 5 years old, permanently. He traded the high-stakes world of phone Phreaking for a life defined by one thing: play. He moved to a small apartment in Minneapolis, surrounded by toys, cassette tapes, and, of course, telephones. But he wasn't hacking long-distance lines anymore. He was using them to heal. He started a service called Stories and Stuff. Anyone could call him at any hour, and Joybubbles would be there. He would tell a story, sing a song, or just whistle that famous 2600 hertz tone to make a stranger smile. The man who had once terrified the world's largest monopoly was now spending his days talking to children and lonely adults, teaching them that the world wasn't a machine to be managed, it was a playground to be explored. We often think of innovation as something that happens in boardrooms or high-tech labs. But Joybubbles proved that the greatest breakthroughs come from the outsiders. The people who aren't looking for a profit, but for a feeling. His whistle was never just about a free phone call. It was a philosophy. It was the belief that if you look at a rigid, cold system, like a billion-dollar monopoly, and you approach it with the curiosity of a child, the system has to give way. Play is the ultimate hack. It's the spark that allowed two kids in a garage to think they could build a personal computer. It's the DNA of the internet itself, a network built by dreamers who just wanted to see if they could connect. Joybubbles passed away in 2007, but his frequency is still ringing. Every time you use an app that someone built just for fun, or every time a developer finds a backdoor in a system that seemed impenetrable, Joybubbles is there. He taught us that the giants only fall when we stop being afraid of them and start playing with them. So, the next time you look at the technology that runs your life, remember the blind boy with the 172 IQ who conquered the world with a whistle and then walked away from it all just to stay a child. Because maybe the hum moment isn't about how the system works. Maybe it's about remembering why we wanted to connect in the first place. You've just uncovered another forgotten truth with Time Recalls, where history's hidden moments are brought back to life and timeless lessons are told for today. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think, don't let it fade. Share it, subscribe, and join us as we continue to explore the untold stories that shaped our world.